lightning struck so violently that the entire apartment shook, and the lamp beside the bookshelf exploded with a sharp pop that sent sparks skittering across the floor. Arielle gasped and stumbled back, her hand flying out to steady herself against the desk, but instead, her fingers caught the handle of a drawer. The force of her stumble yanked it open. Something inside slid forward and landed on the floor by her feet. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room for a split second, long enough for her to see exactly what it was. A photograph. Not just any photograph. Her mother, smiling lovingly at the camera, standing beside Dr. Han Min-seok, her husband, her professor, the man she had married only 2 months earlier. Her breath hitched, sharp and painful. She bent down slowly, her hands trembling as she picked up the photo. The moment her fingertips brushed her mother's face, the power went out completely, plunging the apartment into darkness. Arielle's voice cracked. "What? What is this?" Her whisper felt swallowed by the dark, swallowed by the storm, swallowed by the shattering of her chest. She crouched shakily, reaching into the drawer to feel for anything else. Her fingers brushed paper, thick, old paper, and she pulled it out. A letter, worn around the edges, sealed but fragile. And the handwriting on the front. Her mother's. Her knees nearly buckled. "No!" she choked out. "No, this isn't possible." Her mother had died 3 years ago. How could Dr. Han? How could he possibly? Why would he ever have? Arielle staggered back, gripping the old letter to her chest as the storm roared louder outside the window. Her heartbeat pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. None of this made sense. None of this should exist. She had married him because she had no choice, because she needed to stay in Korea, because she trusted him enough to believe he didn't have motives. But now, she stared at the letter again, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. "Why did you marry me?" she whispered into the darkness. "What did you know? What did you hide?" She felt the edges of her panic sharpen into something colder. This wasn't just a coincidence. This wasn't just a forgotten photograph. This was a secret. A secret that started long before she became his student, long before she ever set foot in Korea, long before she knew his name. She wanted answers, but she feared them. The storm outside cracked again, as if echoing the storm inside her chest. Waves of betrayal, confusion, grief, fear. They crashed together until she couldn't breathe. Her fingers tightened around the photo. This was not where her story began, but it was where everything she thought she knew ended. Months earlier, she had walked into his office looking for help. She had walked in thinking he was a stranger. She had no idea he already knew her. She had no idea he already knew her mother. She had no idea he had made a promise she wasn't supposed to discover, not like this. But to understand how she ended up standing in the dark with her mother's letter clutched to her chest, in the home of a man she thought she trusted. She had to go back. Back to the moment her life began to unravel. Back to the day she learned she had 30 days left before everything she worked for disappeared. Back to the day she first knocked on his door. 3 months earlier, Arielle rushed into the university administrative building, her chest heaving, the strap of her backpack digging into her shoulder. She was already running late for class, but the email she'd received 30 minutes ago clung to her brain like a nightmare she couldn't shake off. The email had been short, cold, indifferent. "Your student visa review has been flagged for administrative error. Please report to the Immigration Liaison Office immediately." She'd dropped everything and sprinted across campus. Now she stood in line, tapping her foot nervously, shuffling her documents, trying not to imagine the worst. "Next," the woman behind the desk called. Arielle stepped forward, her heart slamming in her chest as she handed over her passport, enrollment slip, attendance record, Everything. The woman typed. And typed. Then frowned. Then clicked again slowly, as if rereading something concerning. Arielle's stomach curled into a tight knot. Is something wrong? She asked softly. The woman sighed. Miss Arielle Thomas, your student visa was invalidated 2 weeks ago. The floor disappeared under her feet. I don't understand, she stammered. How could it be invalidated? I'm here legally. I submitted everything. You did, the woman said without emotion. The university failed to submit a critical form during your last renewal. But that's not my fault, Arielle whispered, panic spreading through her chest like fire. I turned in everything. I checked everything twice. And yet the form is missing, the woman interrupted. And because of that, your visa automatically expired. Arielle felt cold. So what do I do? How do I fix it? You can file an appeal, the woman said, but it will not be processed in under 30 days. The words hit like blades. 30 days? She repeated weakly. I don't have anyone in the U.S. to go back to. I don't even know where I'd stay. My mother is gone. I don't have a home. All international students are responsible for maintaining their own documentation, the woman said with a shrug. Appeal if you want, but the 30-day deadline is firm. Then she held out the next student's file, dismissing Arielle without another look. Arielle stumbled backward, her breathing uneven. She could barely see through the sting of tears as she walked out of the office. Her iced latte slipped from her hand and crashed to the floor. She didn't pick it up. She walked outside the building, clutching her documents to her chest, her eyes fixed on the pavement but seeing nothing. She didn't know how long she walked, only that the cold wind slapped her cheeks until they stung, and her throat burned from holding back sobs. She had no family to call, no relatives to stay with, no backup home waiting for her. She had built her whole life here. Her mother's dream lived through her. She couldn't lose this. She couldn't start over. She felt the panic crush her from all sides. And then, she thought of him, Dr. Han Min-sok, the professor who had taught her Korean literature the previous semester. Quiet, reserved, almost too gentle for his stern appearance. He wasn't warm exactly, but he had always treated her with softness, a softness she had desperately needed since her mother's death. Maybe he couldn't fix this, but maybe he could guide her. Maybe he could at least tell her what the next step was. She didn't think, she just moved. Her feet carried her across campus toward the faculty offices, her heartbeat pounding like a drum. She stood outside his door, breathless, tears threatening again. Before she could knock, the door opened. He stood there, tall and still, wearing a charcoal gray sweater, an expression that shifted, just barely, when he saw her. Arielle? He asked quietly. What's happened? She broke. The sobs tore out of her like a dam finally bursting. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Students walking down the hallway slowed, staring, but Dr. Han stepped aside and guided her inside gently. Sit, he said softly. Breathe. Tell me everything. She tried to speak, but the fear strangled her words. They revoked my visa, she finally choked out. They said the university didn't submit the form, and I only have 30 days to leave. I can't go home. I don't have anywhere to go. Please, I don't know what to do. He didn't interrupt her. He didn't try to calm her too quickly. He simply waited until her breathing steadied, watching her with a depth of concern that made her chest ache. Let me see your documents, he said. She handed everything over with trembling hands. He reviewed every page with slow, precise movements. Then he folded his hands and looked at her with a heaviness that made her stomach sink. They cannot process your appeal in time, he said quietly. You will be required to leave before it is reviewed. Arielle shook her head frantically. No, please. There has to be something, anything. There is one option, he said softly. She froze. His voice stayed calm, but there was something new beneath it. A tension. A quiet intensity she'd never heard from him before. If you were married, he said, your visa status would be stable while your case is reviewed. She blinked. Married? Toto, who? His eyes held hers. To me. Her entire body went still. What? She whispered. Professor Doctor. Han, what are you saying? That's insane. It is legal, he said calmly, and it is the only option that guarantees your immediate resident status. She stared at him, completely stunned. You can't just marry me, she said, her voice shaking. We barely know each other. You're older. You were my professor. I am no longer your professor, he said quietly. And this is not about romance. Then what is it about? She whispered. He looked away for a moment, just a moment, before meeting her gaze again with steady eyes and a voice almost too soft. It is about protecting you. She didn't understand it then. Didn't understand that he wasn't lying, that he wasn't manipulating her, that he wasn't acting out of attraction. He was acting out of a promise. A promise she wouldn't discover until far too late. For now, she only felt small, terrified, unanchored. And he was offering her the only lifeline she had left. What happens if I agree? She whispered. Then, he said, we go to the courthouse tomorrow. She could barely breathe. But she nodded. And the next day, she married him. A man she barely knew. A man she didn't love. A man she didn't trust, yet. A man who had known her mother. The courthouse felt colder than she expected. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Sterile, too quiet, too still. Arielle stood in front of the clerk's counter, holding a pen that felt heavier than any textbook she had ever carried. Her signature trembled across the paper, barely legible. Her fingers refused to steady. Dr. Han's signature was clean, controlled, decisive. He stood beside her like an unmoving pillar, his presence strangely steadying yet terrifying all at once. He didn't touch her. He didn't look at her. He simply existed next to her with a calmness that felt almost unreal, while her heart thrummed like a frightened bird. Congratulations, the clerk said mechanically. She stamped the final page and handed it over. Your marriage is legally registered. The word echoed in Arielle's mind. Married. Married to him. Married to a man she barely understood. Married because her life had cornered her so painfully she couldn't breathe without help. Her chest burned with a strange mixture of shame, relief, and guilt. They walked outside together. The sky was a soft gray, flakes of snow drifting down like feathers. People hurried down the street wrapped in scarves and warm coats, oblivious to the fact that Arielle's entire life had shifted in a 20-minute procedure. So, that's it? She whispered. For now, Dr. Han replied. His voice was quiet but not unfriendly, calm but not cold. She tried to read him, but as always, his expression remained controlled, reserved. Where do we go now? She asked, hugging her coat tighter around herself. He glanced at her. To my apartment. Her stomach clenched again. She had known this was coming, but hearing it aloud made everything feel too real, too abrupt. You can remain in the guest room, he added gently. We will live separately within the home. There is no expectation of intimacy or romantic obligations. She let out a shaky breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once. We will discuss the logistics on the way. The drive was silent. He didn't turn on music. She pressed her fingertips against the window, watching the snow blur past the glass while thinking of her mother. How proud she would have been of her for studying abroad. How excited she would have been to hear her stories. But her mother would never know this part. She would never know that her daughter married a man out of necessity. She would never know Arielle's fear, the trembling in her hands, the ache in her chest. and she would never know the strange comfort in the professor's composed presence. It confused her that she felt safer near him. It frightened her that she wanted to trust him. When they arrived, the apartment wasn't what she expected. She imagined something cold, minimalistic, spotless, like him. But it wasn't. The living room was warm, filled with books stacked neatly against the walls. A soft lamp cast a golden glow across a woven rug. A piano sat near the window, the keys uncovered as if someone had played recently. A faint, lingering scent of cedar and jasmine filled the air. It felt lived in. It felt like home. And that terrified her even more. "This is your room," he said, gesturing toward a door at the end of the hall. "If anything is missing, or if you need different bedding, let me know." "Thank you," she said again, her voice barely a whisper. He hesitated in the doorway. He rarely hesitated. That alone made her look up. His lips parted slightly, as though he wanted to say something else, something meaningful, something personal. But then he closed his mouth and nodded once. "Rest," he said. "Today has been difficult." And with that, he left her alone. As soon as the door closed, her legs gave out. She sank to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. Tears she had held back for hours finally spilled down her cheeks. "I'm married," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm married, and I don't know him. I don't know anything about him." Her voice cracked. "I don't know why he helped me." She cried until her chest hurt. But she wasn't the only one who didn't sleep that night. Down the hall, Dr. Hahn sat at his desk, staring at a photo turned face down to protect it from accidental glances. His fingers rested on the frame, tracing the edge slowly, his expression unreadable, eyes dark with a heavy storm of their own. "I kept my promise," he whispered into the silence. His voice trembled in a way Arielle would never have believed possible from him. The next few weeks passed like a series of tiny adjustments. Arielle learned that he woke early, always before dawn. She would hear the soft sounds of him boiling water for tea, the quiet footsteps as he moved through the apartment. He never disturbed her, never intruded. He left breakfast out every morning, neatly arranged, as though it were a ritual he'd been practicing for a long time. He didn't speak much, but the silence around him was never harsh. It was peaceful, respectful. And he always made room for her presence, even if she didn't know how to step into that space comfortably. They acted like strangers who shared a roof, respectful strangers who were trying not to break anything delicate. One morning, she found him on the balcony, sitting on a cushioned bench with a book in one hand and a mug in the other. Snowflakes melted on his dark hair. He looked softer in the morning light, almost younger. She hesitated at the sliding door, uncertain whether she should disturb him. He looked up before she made a sound. "You can join me," he said. Her cheeks warmed. "Oh, okay." She stepped outside, shivering at the cold until he quietly stood and placed his scarf around her neck. She stiffened in surprise. "You'll get sick," he said simply. He sat again, leaving a respectful distance between them. "What are you reading?" she asked. He lifted the cover slightly. "Folk tales. Korean ones?" "Yes." "Can I read one?" He handed her the book without a word. She flipped through the pages, tracing the illustrations with her fingertips. It reminded her of the nights her mother would read to her, the soft cadence of her voice easing away nightmares. "I used to read things like this with my—" She stopped abruptly, throat tightening. He looked at her gently. "Your mother?" She blinked up at him. "How did you—" "You mentioned her once," he cut in quickly, looking away again. "A passing comment. A lie." But she didn't know that yet. Still, something about his tone unsettled her. Something about the softness in his voice, when he said "mother," lingered too long, like an old memory echoing behind a closed door. Do you have family? She asked. He turned a page without looking at her. No. She didn't believe that, though she didn't know why. As days passed, the silence between them became less sharp, softer, warmer. She found herself waiting for moments when they crossed paths, quiet breakfasts, shared dinners, evenings where their routines overlapped naturally. One night, she came home later than usual after a failed attempt to study at a cafe. The winter chill cut through her jacket as she fumbled with the apartment lock. When she stepped inside, she stopped immediately. Dr. Han was at the dining table, a bowl of steaming soup in front of him. When he saw her, his brows drew subtly together. "You didn't eat," he said simply, as though it were an established fact. "How did you know?" "You always come home by 8, he said, rising slowly. "And you didn't send a message, so I assumed you were delayed and cold." She swallowed, unsure whether to be embarrassed or touched. He picked up a second bowl and set it in front of her seat. "Sit," he said. She obeyed. The warmth of the soup seeped into her cold fingers as she wrapped them around the bowl. The gentle steam fogged her vision slightly, softening the world. She whispered, "Thank you for thinking of me." He didn't reply, but he didn't need to. His eyes softened, just barely. It was the first night they ate together without awkwardness. The space between them felt smaller, closer, warmer. She found herself watching him as he quietly ate, observing the way he lifted his chopsticks, the way he paused occasionally before taking a bite, the way his gaze drifted beyond her, as if he were thinking of something far away, something heavy. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. His chopsticks paused midair. "Yes." "Why did you really marry me?" He set his utensils down, wiped his lips calmly, then looked at her. Really looked at her. "You needed help," he said. "And I could help." "But why you?" she whispered. "Why care so much? Why take such a risk?" His jaw tightened ever so slightly. "I told you before," he said, his voice lower. "It was the only way." "But there were other options," she pressed. "Other professors, other adults. You volunteered so quickly, too quickly." His gaze deepened, something unreadable flickering behind it. "If you truly believe I acted with ulterior motives," he said it slowly, "then you misunderstand me." She opened her mouth to speak, but he stood abruptly, collecting the empty dishes, with movements too precise, too controlled. He didn't look at her again. And for the first time, Arielle felt something strange in his distance. Guilt. But guilt for what? That night, when she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop replaying his expression, his tension, his subtle pain, the way he deflected her questions. He was hiding something. And the more she watched him, the quiet concern when she coughed, the way he left a light on in the hallway for her, the way his gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, the more she sensed a deep, buried truth. Something connected them, something older than the moment she knocked on his office door, something tied to her past. Something he didn't want her to know. The first proof arrived the next week, by accident. She found a notebook tucked under a stack of books while cleaning the living room. It wasn't hers. His handwriting filled the pages, neat, sharp, familiar. She wasn't trying to snoop. She wasn't. But the moment she recognized her own name written neatly on the page, her breath stopped. Arielle's visa appeal submitted today. Arielle's financial status, insufficient. Arielle's situation, vulnerable. Her mother would have wanted this. Her blood turned cold. Her heart pounded violently. Her mother would have wanted this? She read the line again and again until her vision blurred. Her fingers trembled as she held the notebook. Why would he write that? Why would he think that? Why would he know that? She slammed the notebook shut and shoved it back under the books, just as the front door unlocked. Dr. Han stepped inside, removing his gloves. His eyes lifted to her immediately, the way they always did, as though he checked for her safety first. "You're home early," he said. Her throat tightened painfully. "Yeah, I was cleaning a little." He nodded, beginning to unbutton his coat. "Dinner is in the fridge. How did you know my mother?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. He froze. Not just a little. Entirely. The coat slipped from his fingers and fell to the floor. He didn't move to pick it up. His eyes lifted slowly, cautiously, meeting hers with an emptiness that made her entire body go cold. "Arielle," he said quietly, "what did you find?" Her heart thrashed in her chest. "I asked you a question," she whispered. A long, suffocating silence stretched between them. And for the first time since she met him, he looked afraid. Arielle took a single step backward. Her spine lightly brushed the wall behind her, but she didn't move away from it. Her eyes stayed fixed on him. The way his posture stiffened, the way his throat moved as he tried to swallow something heavy. She recognized fear when she saw it, and it terrified her more than anything else he could have said. "Tell me," she whispered. Dr. Hahn finally bent down, but not to pick up the coat. He crouched as though he needed a moment to gather himself, one hand braced on the floor, the other shaking as he ran it through his hair. He stayed like that longer than she expected, breathing slowly, deliberately. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said quietly. "Not so soon." Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Find out what?" He stood slowly, but he didn't step forward. He didn't dare. He kept the distance between them, as though crossing it might shatter something fragile. "I knew your mother," he said. "Years ago." She felt something inside her crack. "How?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you say anything? Why did you lie?" "I never lied." "You hid it," she snapped. He flinched, not dramatically, but enough for her to see the impact of her words. "I hid the truth," he admitted. "Yes." "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why would you do that to me? Why pretend I was just some student, when all along—" "No," he cut in sharply. "You were never just a student." A shiver ripped through her. He exhaled slowly, his voice dropping again. "Let me explain." "Then explain," she whispered, gripping the wall behind her. "Because right now, I feel like I married a stranger who has been watching me my whole life." His eyes flickered with something pained. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it?" He opened his mouth to speak, but the words struggled to come. She saw it, the battle inside him. The choice he didn't want to face. The door he didn't want to open. The truth he had held onto so tightly, it became part of him. "I met your mother before you were born," he finally said. Arielle's breath hitched. She lived in Korea for a short time," he continued. "She was studying Korean art history. I was a graduate student then. We worked in the same museum lab." Arielle stared at him, as though the floor had tilted beneath her. Her mother had once mentioned living abroad when she was young, but she never said where. She never said who she knew. She never said anything about Korea. "She was brilliant," he said softly, "warm, kind, and lonelier than she would ever admit." Her throat tightened. Lonely. She missed her family. She struggled with the language. She felt invisible here, but she always smiled through it. "That sounds like her," Arielle whispered, tears threatening again. "She didn't have many friends," he said, "but she trusted me. We studied together, ate together." He paused. "We talked, a lot." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Arielle understood. "You loved her," she whispered. His silence answered for him. Her voice cracked. "Did she love you?" His jaw tensed, but his eyes softened painfully. "She cared for me. But she was already planning to leave. She didn't want to stay in Korea." "So you let her go," she said. "Yes." And then? She left. I never saw her again, he said quietly. But she contacted me years later. She told me she had a daughter. She told me she named you Arielle. She sent me one letter a year, sometimes two, updating me on your life. Until she became sick. Arielle covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Her mother never told her, never mentioned anyone by name, never spoke about a man from Korea at all. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? She asked, tears slipping down her cheeks. His voice softened. Because your mother asked me not to. Arielle froze. She told me to protect you, he said, but to stay distant, to never interfere unless you needed help. She wanted you to live freely without feeling watched or indebted. The words struck her like a blow. She sank into a chair, her head spinning. He waited, giving her space, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. Why would she say that? Arielle whispered. He lowered his gaze. Because she knew she might not be able to protect you herself. Arielle's shoulders slumped. My mother trusted you, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Yes. And you kept that promise. I tried. You married me, she said, her voice breaking, because of her. The truth lay unspoken for a moment. Yes, he said softly, but not only because of her. Arielle looked up sharply. His expression shifted, just barely. A flicker of vulnerability appeared behind his composed mask, fragile and raw. I married you because I wanted to protect you, he said. Not because she asked me to, not because of her memory, but because, when you walked into my office that day, shaking and terrified, I recognized the same fear I once saw in her. She swallowed hard. And I couldn't watch you fall apart the way she once did, he added quietly. Her heart twisted painfully. He stepped back, giving her space, his breathing uneven. Now you know the truth, he said. I understand if you feel betrayed. She did. She felt betrayed, confused, overwhelmed, heartbroken, and something else she couldn't name, something she didn't want to acknowledge. I need time, she whispered. He nodded immediately. Of course, I will give you space. He picked up his coat from the floor, but instead of putting it on, he opened the front door. I'll stay in a hotel for the night, he said. You shouldn't have to see me right now. Her throat tightened painfully. She didn't know what she wanted. She didn't know anything. He stepped out. Before he closed the door, he looked back, not with anger, not with fear, but with something far more heartbreaking. Regret. Then the door shut. Arielle collapsed to her knees. She cried until her chest hurt, until her throat burned, until her fingers cramped from clenching her clothing. Everything felt shattered. Her trust, her certainty, her understanding of her own childhood. And the pain of knowing her mother kept this secret cut deeper than the storm brewing inside her. But even through the tears, she couldn't stop replaying one phrase. Not only because of her. The next morning was worse. She woke up feeling hollow, her eyes swollen, her limbs heavy. She walked through the quiet apartment like a ghost, the silence pressing in from all sides. His absence felt wrong, too loud, too cold. She found herself in the living room, staring at the bookshelf. One book was missing, the notebook she shouldn't have read. Her gut twisted with guilt. She turned away quickly, feeling the sting of her own actions. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from him. You don't need to respond. I only want you to know the refrigerator is stocked. I will return in a few days for my belongings if you decide you wish to live separately. Her chest tightened. He was giving her an escape. He was letting her go. She put the phone down and forced herself to breathe. She needed answers. She needed clarity. She needed to read the last thing her mother ever wrote to him. The letter in the drawer. She hadn't dared touch it when she found it during the storm. But now, she walked down the hall slowly, each step heavier than the last. Her fingers trembled as she opened the drawer, pulling out the old envelope with her mother's handwriting on the front. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it for a long moment. Then she opened it. The smell of faded paper drifted out. Her mother's handwriting flowed across the page like a soft memory. Minseok, if you are reading this, it means you have kept your promise longer than I ever expected you to. Thank you for watching over my daughter from afar. I know you will only interfere in her life in the moment she truly needs it. She is brave, but she does not know how alone she is in this world. Arielle's lips trembled. I don't know if she will ever meet you. I don't know if she will ever know Korea the way I once did. But if she does, if she finds you by fate or by pain, I trust you to protect her. I trust you more than anyone alive. Arielle pressed a hand over her mouth. Tell her the truth only when she is ready. She is sensitive, Minseok. She feels too deeply. She breaks too easily. Be gentle with her, please, and forgive me for asking you to carry this burden. Tears blurred the words. If she is ever scared, if she is ever lost, let her find a home in your kindness, even if she never knows why. Arielle let out a sob. Thank you for loving me once, and thank you for loving her now, even if she never understands it. The letter fell from her hands. Her vision blurred with tears. Her mother knew. Her mother trusted him. Her mother asked him. Her mother chose him. Arielle pressed her forehead against the bed frame, shaking with sobs that tore through her chest like waves of emotion she couldn't contain. Something inside her shifted. Her anger loosened, replaced with something softer, something aching, something tender. She needed to see him. She needed to talk to him. She grabbed her jacket, wiped her face quickly, and rushed out of the apartment. She didn't know where he was staying, but she knew exactly where he would go. He always went there when he needed silence. The old library. Snow fell in slow, lazy spirals as she ran through the campus gates. Her breathing came in sharp bursts, her hair sticking to her damp cheeks. Students stared as she dashed past, but she didn't stop, didn't care. The lights inside the library glowed warm behind the frosted glass. She pushed through the doors. And there he was. Sitting alone at a wooden table in the corner, a cup of untouched coffee beside him, the same notebook open in front of him. His expression was hollow. Her breath caught. Dr. Han, she whispered. His head snapped up instantly. The shock in his eyes was unmistakable. Arielle, he whispered. She nodded, trying to steady her breathing. I read the letter. His face crumpled, just slightly, but enough to show the pain he'd been holding back. You weren't meant to find it like this, he said. I know. They stood in silence for a moment. Then she stepped closer. I'm not leaving you, she whispered. His breath hitched. I don't want to live separately, she said. I don't want you to disappear because you think you hurt me. I just didn't understand. He swallowed hard. And now I know the truth. She took another step closer. Her voice softened. And now I understand why you saved me. His eyes glistened, barely noticeable, but enough to shatter her. Arielle, he whispered. She reached out slowly and touched his hand. He froze. Her fingers trembled. Take me home, she whispered. He inhaled sharply. Then, for the first time since she met him, he closed his hand around hers. Not carefully, not cautiously, but with the desperate tenderness of someone who had been waiting far too long. She felt it instantly, the warmth, the anchor, the truth. She didn't know where their relationship would go. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know what love between them would eventually look like. But she knew one thing. He wasn't a stranger. Not anymore. Not ever again. The warmth of their hands touching was electric, yet fragile, like glass that might shatter if handled too quickly. Arielle's heart thudded against her ribs as she followed Dr. Han out of the library, feeling an unfamiliar sense of certainty in a life that had seemed so uncertain for so long. Snowflakes clung to her hair, melted on her eyelashes, and yet she didn't care. Every step toward the car felt like reclaiming something she had lost without even knowing it. The drive back to the apartment was quiet. Neither of them spoke, yet neither needed to. The world outside blurred past, cold and gray, while the small space inside the car seemed to contain an entirely different reality. Something fragile had shifted, and it felt almost sacred. Arielle kept her hand loosely in his, realizing it felt like the safest place she had ever been. Once inside, she hesitated in the doorway, overwhelmed by emotion. He looked at her, calm but intense, as if waiting for her to decide how this reunion should proceed. She didn't know where to start. Apologies, questions, confessions. But she realized she didn't need to start at all. The moment she closed the door behind her, the silence between them was heavy, but comforting. She was finally home. I don't know what to say, she admitted softly. You don't have to say anything, he replied. His voice, though quiet, carried an emotion she had never heard from him before. Not anger, not frustration. Something heavier, something true. She dropped her coat, letting it fall to the floor, and walked slowly toward him. He didn't step back. He didn't flinch. He simply waited. And when she reached him, she let herself touch him again. Not just his hand, but his shoulder, his chest, her forehead resting against him briefly. She felt his warmth, steady and grounding. She felt his breath, slow but steady, matching her own racing pulse. I was so angry, she whispered. I felt betrayed. I thought you were hiding everything, watching me, controlling me. I didn't hide you, he said softly. I protected you. But you married me, she said, her voice breaking. How am I supposed to understand that? How could you make me dependent on you when I barely knew you? He lifted a hand and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. I did what I had to do, he said. Not for me, not for my convenience. For you, for your safety, for the promise I made. Her chest tightened. She wanted to cry again, but this time it wasn't just grief. It was something heavier, something like relief, gratitude, and the first flicker of trust she had allowed herself since the marriage began. You didn't have to do any of this, she said. I could have found another way. You didn't have another way, he interrupted gently. And I knew that. That's why I married you. And not just to protect your legal status. I married you to keep you safe from anything life might throw at you while you were vulnerable. She pulled back slightly to look at him fully. His eyes were steady, deep, dark, and filled with emotion he never voiced in words before. His controlled calm now carried weight, a gravity that made her realize she had underestimated him completely. He wasn't just composed. He was devoted. Quietly, relentlessly devoted. Arielle's lips trembled. You loved my mother, she said softly. And you loved her enough to protect me. Yes, he admitted. But it isn't only about her. It's about you, Arielle. I can't explain fully why. But when I saw you that day in my office, I knew I couldn't let you face this alone. And I couldn't let you fall. Her tears came then, unrestrained, dripping down her cheeks and onto her coat. She wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. She wanted to scream and whisper. She wanted everything at once, and yet she felt the calm anchor of him beside her, silent but powerful. You're not a stranger, she whispered again, her voice catching. Not anymore. He exhaled slowly, a soft sound of relief escaping him. Not now, not ever. For a long moment, they simply stood there, connected yet cautious, as if both were testing the fragile reality of this new truth. Then, almost instinctively, she leaned into him. He held her gently at first, but the grip slowly became firmer, protective. It was not a possession, it was a promise, and in that promise, Arielle felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Safety, finally, in someone else. Days turned into weeks, and their lives slowly adapted to a new rhythm. Arielle started to understand him in ways she never expected. His mornings, filled with quiet rituals, became comforting. His reserved gestures, subtle and deliberate, became familiar. And the more she observed him, the more she realized that his patience and care were not only for appearances, they were genuine. Every small act was intentional, every moment thought out to ensure she felt supported and safe, even when she didn't see it. She started leaving notes in the kitchen. Small ones, reminders of groceries she needed, questions about literature she didn't understand, even a tiny, joking doodle now and then. And he responded, always in kind, quietly, without fanfare, leaving a cup of tea or a bookmarked page in a book she had borrowed. It was a silent dialogue, one that didn't need words to communicate connection, respect, and, gradually, trust. Then, one evening, Arielle returned home late from her part-time job, exhausted and cold. The snow had started again, thick and heavy, falling like frozen whispers across the empty streets. She fumbled with the keys, her fingers stiff, and when she entered, she found the apartment illuminated by soft lamplight, a small fire crackling in the hearth, and the faint scent of jasmine in the air. On the table was a note, written in his careful, precise handwriting. "You must be tired. Eat first. We will talk later. I will wait." She felt warmth bloom in her chest she hadn't expected. She ate quickly, washed her hands, and then sat in the living room, waiting. The fire flickered, the shadows danced along the walls, and for the first time since she arrived in Korea, she felt entirely at peace. When he finally appeared, the quiet in the apartment deepened. He did not rush to speak. He did not demand answers. Instead, he sat across from her, their knees nearly touching under the low coffee table. The tension from the past months, the lies, the secrets, the unspoken words, all of it hovered between them like a fragile glass dome. And yet, it no longer frightened her. "I have something to say," he began, voice low, steady, but weighted with emotion. "I know this has been confusing and overwhelming, and I know you may still feel angry at me." "I do," she admitted softly. "But I also understand, more than I thought I could." He nodded, a subtle relief passing across of his expression. "I never wanted to hurt you, not in any way. The marriage, the secrecy, all of it was meant to protect you, not to control you. And I know it hasn't felt that way." She exhaled slowly. "I know now. And I forgive you. Not because it was easy, but because I see why you did it." A tension lifted between them, almost imperceptibly at first, then fully. Arielle leaned forward, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. He tensed for a heartbeat, then relaxed, allowing her to stay. Their breaths synchronized, quiet, natural, comforting. The months of fear, confusion, and frustration gave way to something neither of them could fully define yet, but both recognized: trust, respect, and the faint, undeniable stirrings of love. Over the next few days, the unspoken bond strengthened. Small moments, reading together, sharing meals, walking through the quiet, snowy streets, became precious, intimate. Laughter began to echo in their apartment, soft and tentative at first, then genuine. He began sharing stories from his past, rare glimpses of his childhood, his studies, the memories of her mother he had carefully tucked away. And she began sharing her own thoughts, dreams, and fears in return. The walls between them crumbled, brick by brick, until what remained was something unbreakable. One night, Arielle found herself standing at the balcony. The city sprawled beneath her in a blanket of white snow. Dr. Han stepped out silently behind her, placing a gentle hand on her back. "You're thinking about your mother," he said softly. "I am," she admitted. "I wish she could see this, see us. I wish she knew that you kept your promise." He nodded. "She would have been proud, and she would have been grateful that you are safe, that you have someone who cares for you, not just because of a promise, but because he wants to. Her heart skipped. Do you care for me? She asked, voice barely audible. His hand squeezed hers gently. I do, more than I expected, more than I can explain. Arielle felt tears rise, not of sadness this time, but of relief, gratitude, and a growing, undeniable warmth. She turned to him, searching his eyes, and for the first time in months, she felt entirely seen, entirely understood, and entirely at home. He leaned in slowly, carefully, giving her the chance to step back. But she didn't. She met him halfway, their lips brushing softly at first, then with a gentle insistence, an unspoken promise forming in that kiss. It wasn't about desire or obligation. It was about trust. It was about care. It was about love, growing quietly, but with unstoppable force. When they pulled away, Arielle rested her forehead against his, breathing in rhythm with him. I don't know what the future holds, she whispered. Neither do I, he said, but we face it together. The snow continued to fall around them, silent and eternal, as if blessing the fragile, newly forged bond between them. The storm had passed, the darkness had lifted, and in that quiet moment, Arielle knew one undeniable truth. She was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because of fate, not because of obligation, not because of her mother's promise alone, but because they had chosen each other. And that choice, unlike everything else in her life, was theirs and theirs alone. The city lights flickered below them. Inside the apartment, warmth filled the space. Outside, the snow blanketed the world, quiet, calm, unbroken. And for the first time, Arielle smiled, not from relief, not from fear, not from gratitude alone, but from the raw, tender certainty that she was home. Home, not just in a place, but in a person. And Dr. Hahn held her close, steady, unwavering. His promise kept, his heart open, their future unwritten, yet safe in that fragile, perfect now.